This is the brand new iPhone 8. So this is the first of Apple's 3 new iPhones for 2017, the iPhone 8, the iPhone 8 Plus, and the iPhone 10. And I've been using the iPhone 8 for the past 3 full weeks now, and this is my full in-depth review covering everything you need to know from the display, the camera, performance improvements, all the new features, battery life, and everything you need to know about the iPhone 8. By the way, if you subscribe and enable notifications if you're new to the channel and you want to see more in-depth reviews like this one. I've also done a similar one on the Apple Watch Series 3, by the way, in case you want to see that. The link for that is in the description. But in this one, iPhone 8 in-depth review, hope you got all that popcorn ready to go. So enjoy. Okay, so starting off with the design, from the front, the iPhone 8 looks identical to the iPhone 7, which looked identical to the iPhone 6s, which looked identical to the iPhone 6 from 2014. The only way that you can tell that this is an iPhone 8 is by looking at the back of the phone. So it's now made out of glass, and it reminds us a lot of the iPhone 4 and the iPhone 4S back in the day, which, by the way, were my favorite iPhone design ever. Let me know in the comments which one is your favorite iPhone design. But yeah, the iPhone 8 also comes in only 3 colors now, from the full 6 range of colors that we had with the iPhone 7. So the iPhone 8 now comes in silver, then we have space gray, which is this one. This one is actually dark gray, and interesting enough, Apple keeps changing the naming scheme for the space gray color every single year. And I do like this one a lot. It's, dark gray, I like it. But do keep in mind that it's not as dark as the one on the iPhone 7 from last year. So personally, I like this one, but the one on the iPhone 7, I like that one much more. And then finally, we also have this brand new gold color, which I think looks pretty cool. So it's somewhere in between the old gold and the rose gold that we had previously. And especially on this glass back, it looks really, really premium and really, really nice. I like the way it feels, I like the way it looks. Definitely my favorite gold color on any iPhone so far. Now, another design change is the frame. So even though the frame is still made out of aluminum and not stainless steel, like we have on the iPhone 10, for example, there's a more seamless transition between the front, the frame, and the glass back. So I really like how this feels in the hand. It feels like one piece of glass aluminum. So it feels much better than, for example, the iPhone 7 did. Now, speaking of how it feels in the hand, both the iPhone 8 and the iPhone 8 Plus are now thicker and heavier than the iPhone 7 and the iPhone 7 Plus, which, by the way, was thicker and heavier than the iPhone 6s, which, by the way, was thicker and heavier than the iPhone 6. And this is definitely noticeable when you're holding it in your hand. So I immediately noticed that I was holding something bulkier and heavier, but it's not a huge difference, to be honest, though it's only 10 grams heavier and 0.2 millimeters thicker than the iPhone 7. But especially if you're coming from an iPhone 6 or even 6s, or even 7, this is definitely something that you are going to notice. But overall, to be honest, the iPhone 8 feels kinda old. So yes, you do have a new back, but most of the time you'll be using this with a case on. And in that case, pun intended, the front will look identical to an iPhone 6 from 2014. So it doesn't feel like you have a new iPhone at all. Now, moving on to the display, we still have exactly the same display size as, the previous 4.7 inches iPhone. So 4.7 inches, the display size, and we also have exactly the same resolution, which is 1334 by 750. Exactly the same one as on the 2014 iPhone 6. Now with the iPhone 7, we did get a DCI-P3 display, so a wider color gamut, capable of displaying a wider range of colors. And I have to say, hands down, this is by far the best LCD display on any smartphone right now. So colors are incredibly vibrant, the viewing angles are also impressive, and the brightness is actually fairly good at up to 625 nits. However, there's only so much that you can do with an LCD display. So OLED displays, these are the future, and Samsung has been using OLED displays for almost 10 years now. Almost 10 years, Apple just moving to OLED with the iPhone 10. So even though it's a good display, it feels outdated when compared to other smartphones. In size, in resolution, and of course in the display technology panel, which is still an LCD display. Now, there are 2 display improvements from the iPhone 7. So the first one is a True Tone display. So what's this? Well, essentially the display automatically adjusts its color temperature based on the lighting conditions in your environment. So it basically makes it easier on the eyes And in case you're wondering, yes, it does turn itself off in the Photos app or when taking pictures, but sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes in iOS 11 it's glitched and it doesn't turn itself off, which means that the photos and the pictures that you take in the camera app will look a bit weird and warmer than they actually are in real life. And then if you're using third-party apps such as Google Photos, for example, it doesn't seem to turn itself off. So I personally don't like using it as it is affecting the photo editing and the photo viewing experience. So, it's one of those features that's nice to have, but not in every single situation. And finally, the second design change is when it comes to the glass itself. So Apple says that this is the strongest glass on any smartphone, front and back. However, Apple hasn't really said what they actually mean by this. So is it the most durable glass when it comes to drops? Or is it the most durable glass when it comes to scratches? Because obviously you have to trade one off for the other. That's how glass works. Now, some people have done drop tests, and this thing actually cracks very easily. And when it comes to scratches, I already have scratches on mine, by the way. It's easier to see this on the black model, but still I have lots of hairline scratches, and I've been using this with with an Apple leather case since day one. Now, on the other hand, my Samsung Galaxy S8 Plus is still in almost mint condition after almost 6 months of usage. So this is definitely not the most durable glass on a smartphone, at least not when it comes to scratches. Okay, moving on to the camera, this is where we see the first big change in this phone. So the camera on this thing is just incredible. So when it comes to photos, Apple uses a new sensor which lets way more light into the camera than the iPhone 7. Apple says that it lets up to 83% more light in than the iPhone 7 did. So overall, low light shots definitely look amazing on this. I'm really impressed from the iPhone 7. Obviously the difference is even bigger if you're coming from a 6S or an iPhone 6. So a significant improvement from the iPhone 7, and as you can see, we get much less noise on the iPhone 8. Then when it comes to the daytime shots, Apple has finally improved the processing, and we get much more vibrant shots this time. So they do have a bit more processing going on in post, which is not as drastic as on Samsung phones, by the way, but it's definitely more pronounced than on the iPhone 7. And finally, HDR photos on this thing just look amazing. Apple even removed the HDR mode in the camera app, which by the way you can enable in the settings if you wish, but by default it's disabled. So all the shots that the iPhone 8 takes are now HDR processed automatically. And we get some amazing dynamic range on the iPhone 8. So overall, I would say that a camera is by far the biggest improvement that we've seen in any iPhone generation from one to another ever since the iPhone 5 to the 5S. But I'm not done yet when it comes to the camera. It's not just the photos that look significantly better, it's also the videos. So we get 4K 60 frames per second video on the iPhone 8, which is the first phone in the world that can do 4K 60 frames per second video. This is amazing because you can only do 4K video in just a few cameras. And you can only do 4K 60 videos in even fewer camera models. You have, those really expensive ones. The cheapest one that can do 4K 60 would be the Panasonic GH5, which is like a $2,000 or it's about almost 2,000 pounds camera. And this is a phone, a $700, 700 pound phone. Obviously the quality is not the same, but still, at least you get that resolution and that frame rate for when you need it. And speaking of resolution and frame rates, the iPhone 8 can now do slow motion in 1080p up to 240 frames per second. This is up from 720p 240, which is what we had on the iPhone 7. Now, unfortunately, cinematic stabilization, by the way, doesn't work in 4K 60. So as you can see from this video, we get a lot of shake and a lot of jelly-like effect when recording in 4K 60, which I don't really like. So this definitely needs some major improvements, so hopefully this would be fixed in iOS 11.1 or 11.2. I mean, if you compare this to something like the stabilization on the Google Pixel XL, the first generation, not the Google Pixel XL 2, the difference is just night and day. Stabilization on the iPhone 8 Plus and the iPhone 8 is just so bad at the moment, especially when it comes to recording in 4K 60. Now, speaking of things that need an improvement, the front-facing camera got no improvements from the iPhone 7, so we get exactly the same 7 megapixel sensor, f2.2 aperture, and 1080p video recording up to 30 frames per second. So no changes on the front-facing camera from the iPhone 7. And honestly, it's not that bad, but there's so much better front-facing cameras on other smartphones out there. So front-facing camera, the iPhone 8 is not the best. I've done a few extremely in-depth camera comparisons between the iPhone 8, the iPhone 7, the iPhone 8 and the Samsung Galaxy S8 Plus, and the iPhone 8 and the Google Pixel XL. So if you want to see any of these comparisons, they're extremely in-depth, tested a lot of scenarios. I don't think you've ever seen any camera comparisons this detailed, so definitely check those out. The link for any of these is in the description. Now moving on to the performance, in terms of the RAM, we get 2 GB of RAM on the iPhone 8, which I know doesn't seem like a lot, but iOS RAM management is actually really good. It's amazing. So 2 GB of RAM honestly isn't an issue on the iPhone 8 at all. Now when it comes to the processor, we get the Apple A11 Bionic chip. And this one is just ridiculously powerful. So it's now based on a smaller 10nm process. So this means that it's more power efficient. It's also smaller in size. And it actually comes with 2 high performance cores now and 4 low performance cores. And what's interesting about the Apple A11 chip is that all cores can be now used at the same time. So we finally get a 6-core processor, up from the dual-core processor on the iPhone 7, since on the iPhone 7 only one CPU cluster could be used at the same time with the Apple A11 chip. So dual-core on the iPhone 7, high performance, and now you have all 6 cores that can be used on the iPhone 8. So long story short, the iPhone 8 is even more powerful than a 13-inch baseline 2017 MacBook Pro. And it just murders all other mobile smartphones on the market right now by at least 2x a 2x performance difference. So this thing is just crazy powerful, a complete overkill. Now the Apple A11 chip also comes with a neural engine that can actually process up to 600 billion operations per second. And you may wonder why does Apple need that? Well, on the iPhone 10 this is used for the depth camera on the front, but you don't actually have that on the iPhone 8 and the iPhone 8 Plus at the moment. So at the moment the neural engine is not really used. So it's most likely going to be used at some point in the future, maybe with a smarter version of Siri at some point. So having that neural engine would definitely have its advantages in some future iOS update. So it's like, future-proofing your device by getting an Apple A11 device. So yeah, this thing is indeed crazy powerful. So you can create complex music projects in GarageBand with this, and you can even edit 4K videos on your smartphone. I mean, most people won't do this, but yes, you can do that. You can even edit 4K 60 videos buttery smooth on an iPhone 8, which, a lot of computers still struggle with. And, most people won't actually use this. Most people would just use the iPhone 8 for Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, watching YouTube videos, like watching this video you're watching right now. So how's the iPhone 8 in that case? Well, in that case, to be honest, the iPhone 8, even though it has amazing performance, insane performance, it's not as fluid as you would expect. And this is mostly because of how glitchy iOS 11 is right now. So there's a lot of issues, there's a lot of app crashes. I've done a few ultimate performance tests between the iPhone 8 and different smartphones, so definitely check those out in case you want to see exactly how fast the iPhone 8 is when compared to the iPhone 7, the Samsung Galaxy S8, and more. Okay, now moving on to the new features on the iPhone 8. The first one is wireless charging. Now, I know this is not something new at all. So we've seen this on many Android smartphones for many years, but it's actually really good to see it on the iPhone finally. And what's really unexpected about this is that wireless charging on the new iPhones works with any cheap Qi enabled charger that you can find on Amazon. So I've actually included the link to a cheap one in the description, and this one actually works pretty well. So you don't need an Apple one, this one just works. Now the new iPhone 8s also support fast wireless charging, however it's not enabled yet. So this will be enabled in a future software update, which is most likely going to be 11.1. But other than that, wireless charging works really well, and we finally have it on the iPhones. Now, speaking of charging, the second new feature is fast charging. So with the iPhone 8 and the iPhone 8 Plus and the iPhone 10, you can actually charge them in up to 50% in just 30 minutes, which is pretty impressive. However, you do need to use a fast wireless charger, such as a MacBook charger, which is not cheap. So you have to buy it separately. It's not included in the box, which is a bit of a disappointment. I've actually included the link in the description to a pretty cheap fast wireless charger that actually works really well, and it's also small when compared to Apple's MacBook chargers. I've done a few tests, charging tests of the iPhone 8, 8 Plus and more, and also a few experiments on how fast the iPhone 8 charges with different chargers. So definitely check those out if you want to know more about fast charging on the iPhone 8. Then the third new feature on the iPhone 8 is VR. So VR Kit was introduced in iOS 11 on all iPhone models that support iOS 11. So that's an iPhone 5S and newer. So any new iPhone from iPhone 5S or newer can take advantage of VR apps. However, VR apps actually work best on an iPhone 7 Plus, since that one does come with a second camera module, and it works even better on an iPhone, for example, an iPhone 8 Plus or an iPhone 8, because those ones have a new gyroscope inside them, which Apple says that it was calibrated especially for VR. And from what I've seen, from what tests I've done, VR tracking is a tiny bit better on the iPhone 8 Plus than on the iPhone 7 Plus, but it's not a huge difference. It's definitely better, but it's not a massive difference. Then another new feature is Bluetooth 5.0. So this basically means twice the signal strength and also a range of up to 200 meters, which is crazy when you think about it. And on top of all this, Bluetooth 5.0 also supports audio from two devices connected at the same time. So for example, you can have two Bluetooth headphones and listen to two different songs at the same time. So two people can, listen to the same device, two different songs with two Bluetooth headphones. Now, unfortunately, at the moment, Apple doesn't currently support this. Bluetooth 5.0 does, but Apple doesn't. So this one might be coming at some point in the future in a software update and with the second generation AirPods, most likely. And finally, we also get 25% louder speakers on the iPhone 8. So in case you don't know, ever since the iPhone 7, we did get stereo speakers. So we have one on the bottom, and then we also have the earpiece on the top, which now acts as a speaker by itself. And these are actually one of the best speakers I've ever seen on a phone. So the only true competitor would be HTC's old boom sound speakers, if you remember that, back in the HTC day. And the Google Pixel 2, by the way, also comes with dual front-facing stereo speakers, which might actually be better than the iPhone 8 ones because they're, front-facing, both of them. But the Pixel 2 isn't really out yet, so at the moment, these are the best speakers on any smartphone at this time. So the sound is very clear, and this small thing can actually produce some incredibly loud noise. And by the way, the quality is fairly well retained, even when you're bumping up the volume. And finally, how's the battery life on this small thing? So surprisingly, even though the battery itself is smaller than the iPhone 7, because yes, we do have a smaller battery on the iPhone 8 than the 7, the battery life itself is actually better, since the Apple 11 processor is way more power efficient than the Apple A10 was, since it's now based on a smaller 10nm process. So in the end, it does last longer than the iPhone 7 did. However, for me personally, I just cannot make it through a full day of usage with my usage on a 4.7 inches iPhone. So I need a Plus iPhone model for that. And even a Plus model is not enough in some cases, but I do have a fairly high usage, so obviously this would depend on the user. Okay, so in the end, what do I think about the iPhone 8? Well, I decided to start a scoring system, a Zone of Tech scoring system for each of my reviews, and here's how much the iPhone 8 gets and why. So for anyone getting the iPhone 8 as a brand new device, so a first-time iPhone user, I would give the iPhone 8 about an 8.2 out of 10. And now if you're upgrading from an iPhone 7 to the iPhone 8, I would give the iPhone 8 a 4.2 out of 10. So on the plus side, the iPhone 8 is incredibly fast. It also comes with a great display for an LCD panel. It also comes with an amazing camera, and then it also comes with an amazing ecosystem. So performance and app selection is just amazing, especially if you have different multiple Apple devices. Everything will be perfectly in sync. And then wireless charging is a pretty nice addition to the iPhone. So those are the plus sides. Okay, so what about the negatives? Well, it's still a 2014 design. It also doesn't come with any display resolution improvements since 2014. Same resolution as in 2014. And then the battery life is good. It's improved from the iPhone 7, but it's still not great. And then fast charging, it is there, but you need to buy an extra adapter. It's not included in the box. Then the front-facing camera is exactly the same as on the iPhone 7, so no improvements. And then on top of all this, it's more expensive than the iPhone 7 was last year. Why? Why would you make it? I don't know. But it's more expensive than the iPhone 7 was last year. But yeah, there you go, my in-depth review on the iPhone 8. Let me know in the comments what you guys think about the iPhone 8. Do you think it's worth it? Do you think it's not worth it? Let me know what you think. And also subscribe and enable notifications for more in-depth reviews like this one. I've done a similar one on the Apple Watch Series 3. Definitely check it out if you want to see that. And yeah, other than that, feel free to give a like if you have enjoyed it, to let me know. It took a really long time to make, so every feedback is really appreciated. Other than that, thank you for watching. Let me know in the comments if you're epic enough to make it until the end, by the way, by saying I was epic enough to make it until the end. Other than that, I'm Daniel, and I'll see you guys in my next one. Son of Tech, signing out. Cheers.